Hi there, folks. Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand. I have with me today on the line John Haller. Welcome, John. I think it's been a couple of months since we've talked.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Hang on a second here. I have my phone talking to me. So yeah, it's been a couple, as we were talking beforehand. It's been a rough about a month for me. We've kind of run through the big C again, it appears. And but we're getting over it. We're recovering. But I'm telling you what, this one was different.
I have to say, I think I've been going through it as well. I haven't been tested, but I haven't been well for weeks fully either. Still not right. So anyway, It's just the way it goes. So before I throw to you, John, I just want to mention to folks online, please don't make YouTube your only port of call with A Minute to Midnight. Our last video I did with Leo Hyman was censored, taken down and banned, and given the channel a strike in less than 30 minutes after it was posted. Please, folks, make sure you subscribe to us at our website, aminutemidnight.com, and also realize we have a Rumble channel, a BitChute channel, and an Apple Podcast channel. Censorship is only going to eventually take us right off YouTube, I'm sure. So, folks, I really want to stress, don't just trust YouTube. Go to us on other platforms because the censorship will only get worse. Okay, John, so now we've had so much going on in the last little bit. I just want to, before I give it to you, the big one is obviously the event that happened in PA, Pennsylvania, with Mr. Trump the other day. Immediately, I knew there would be two camps on the Christian side. Some that would be saying, and of course they did, false prophets coming out immediately, the same old ones saying this proves that Donald Trump is God's man because he's still alive, and you've got to rally all Christians behind him because this is going to be American 250 more years of prosperity with Donald Trump kicking it off and such things like that, which I think is complete rubbish and complete false prophets. You had the other side, and I knew within 10 minutes of it happening that this would occur. You'll have another lot of people that say this proves that Donald Trump is the Antichrist because this is the mortal wound from Revelation. And it's like, oh, no, neither of those things are correct. Neither of them prove anything. And then, of course, you've got the Blue Anons and the QAnons with their different opposing theories about the staging of the whole thing. And let's face it, John, that you can't trust the media. That's the one thing I think we can get out of this. I don't think we'll ever know the full truth because the alphabet agencies will cover things if it suits them, cover up things. So we may never know the truth about what happened exactly, whether there was some staging around it, because there's just so many things that don't add up really. I don't want to go into them deeply, but when you look at it and the close grazing and what's the chances of that happening and so on, it's like something doesn't seem quite right about all of this. But the point is we might not even know exactly what happened, and people can theorize one way or another about the whole thing. And that if you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't think we'll ever know for sure because you can't trust the media and you can't trust the alphabet agencies to tell you the truth. But what I think is more important is how will this be used in the future to clamp down on freedoms and so on for the average rank and file people like us? Because something will come out of this, no doubt, that'll change it for all of us. So that's, to me, is probably the bigger takeaway out of it. Anyway, I'll give it to you now, John.
Well, let's start at the last one because I agree with you that somehow they're going to turn this into something like extremism led to this.
Yeah.
And therefore we have to shut down different media outlets and that sort of thing. And what you saw with this shooter was that within minutes there were fake videos being put up by people saying, I'm the shooter.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hate Republicans. And so everything was fake. And the one thing I think we learned from this particular incident is it's like the perfect postmodern storm. Postmodernism being that you can determine your own truth, and it may be true for you and not true for everybody else. And the facts don't really matter. It's what you feel to be true.
Yeah.
And so this one, everybody is picking up what they want the conclusion to be.
Yeah.
And I think since we spent a lot of time talking about Bible prophecy, excuse me, I'm going to have to take a drink occasionally. But let's look at the fatal head wound thing from Revelation 13. I think this is kind of an instructive exercise for those of us who watch for the signs. We are watching for certain things to happen. And certainly this Revelation 13 prophecy, the mark of the beast and that sort of thing, we refer to that a lot. And there is this passage in there that talks about the fatal head wound. And so the question is, maybe it's time to, rather than speculate about whether a particular event is that which was prophesied, is to talk a little bit about how this particular passage might play out. Because I don't really see a lot, and I'll admit I'm probably as guilty of it as everybody else. I don't see a lot of good analysis about, okay, well, what is this referring to? Is this referring to a literal fatal wound? Is it a king that's in the head, one of the heads of the beast system that comes about, and is it a kingdom that's appears to have been mortally wounded, and
because
now it's coming back?
One of the heads doesn't say, isn't it? And as far as I know, Mr. Trump's only got one head, so he hasn't got multiple.
And 7 heads, and on his horns and 10 horns, and his horns 10 crowns, and so one of the heads, it says, has this fatal wound. And so the question is, what does that mean exactly? Because we all want to say, well, this is the beast, this is the Antichrist, but it appears that it's part of the beast system.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we sort of have this conversation about what does this really mean.
Yeah.
Is it literal? Is it symbolic? And I don't mean we have to have the conversation, you and me, right now. But I think that rather than what I saw was, so look, if somebody's concluded, and them, they're out there, some of them are friends of ours, have concluded that Trump is the Antichrist.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that Trump is the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And so they're going to interpret everything that happens through that particular filter, whether it's valid or not.
Yeah.
By the same token, there's some who've concluded that King Charles is the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And I think they're guilty of the same thing. And then, Charles comes out with that ridiculous painting that looks like he's emerging from a sea of blood. And you want to say sometimes, like, if you don't want people to think you're the Antichrist, stop acting like it. And stop putting all these symbols out there. But the problem is everybody sort of interprets everything through the lens of I'm right.
And the thing is, John, there are plenty of people still that believe Barack Obama is the Antichrist and he's going to come back. Kamala Harris will be president and then Barack Obama will come back that way and things like that. So everyone's got their theories on it. But at this point in time, they are only theories. We don't know for sure about any of them. But, one thing I did notice, because I think you mentioned it's a perfect storm, and I think there are a lot of things with this shooting event, that don't add up. How it could have happened. Was it gross incompetence on the Secret Service's part, or was it deliberate? We won't know. But one thing, it was on the 13th of the 7th, which I thought that's really interesting, because here you've got, if you're an occultist, you've got 2 numbers. You've got the 13, which is the devil's number to many people, You've got the 7, which to many people is God's number. So they've timed that lovely, perfect sort of thing. And of course, with Trump, there's a lot of 7s. I won't go into that, but I covered that before the 2016 election. And there's a kind of a Nazi cult with a 777 cult, which is occultic too, and a lot of Christians don't realise that. But there's an awful lot of stuff, and we can kind of go, oh, these things really look interesting, but we can't specifically put our hats on something and say, this is exactly what happened. We won't know, I don't think.
Yeah, look, every Sunday I refer to Daniel chapter 12, which talks about people running to and fro in the end and knowledge increasing. And I think that has it's sort of a Jewish way of thinking. It has a sort of a surface meeting. People are running to and fro, a lot of travel going on. I mean, we've had record travel days here in the United States in the past month, like the biggest travel days ever in all of history, at least number of people going through the TSA checkpoints.
Wow. Okay.
I think 4 of the biggest days ever in the last 30 days. And I think last week was 1 or 2 of the 2 biggest days ever. So people are running to and fro, and there's a lot of, with the information technology that we talk about a lot, there's an increase in knowledge, an increase in information. It's always interesting. I always say too, there's an increase in knowledge, but there doesn't appear to be a similar rise in an increase in wisdom.
Yeah.
In all of this, they seem to be on separate tracks. In fact, as one goes up, the other seems to be going down. But the other part of it is that I think that the deeper meaning of Daniel chapter 12 is that people would be going back and forth through the book of Scripture, through the books of prophecy, and knowledge will increase. And so as we get closer, in fact, Daniel's then said, well, when is all this going to happen? I want to know what's going to happen. And they said, it's not for you, Daniel, it's for the time of the end. So at the time of the end, it talks about these people, also mentions them in Daniel chapter 11. I referred to the ones who understand, and the wise will understand and instruct many. So I think we want to be in that wise camp, but we can't pull this, we can't plant the flag too quickly. Yeah. I think is a problem that we have.
I agree, John. That's completely right. We have to be weighing things up as we see it. That doesn't mean jumping to conclusions like so many people seem to, and then they have a pet theory and a pet doctrine on something, and then everything has to orbit around that, like you said, which is not necessarily correct the way it should be. We do need to be wise. I mean, personally, I still hold to the belief, I think, that both sides in the political spectrum are controlled by an elite behind them. I don't think Mr. Trump is any separate to that. There's an awful lot I could cover on that, with the occult symbolism on Trump Tower and all sorts of other things. But at this point, it's almost, what's the point? Because so much information is now out there anyway.
Right, but the problem, Tony, is that with someone like Trump, is you get some of what you like.
Well, John, it's appealing to that, that Hegelian dialectic. I've said to people, well, you look at this for a start. If you want Hegelian dialectic, how about who funds Trump and who funds Biden? Okay, you've got largely BlackRock been funding the Biden thing, and Blackstone funding, Stephen Schwarzman and Blackstone funding Trump. I mean, how obvious is that? BlackRock and Blackstone. So,
and now you have Trump's selected vice presidential candidate, which my understanding is somebody like Whitney Webb says, well, J.D. Vance is a protege of the billionaire Peter Thiel,
yeah,
who there's a lot of issues with. And so, I'm not opposed to J.D. Vance. I mean, he's our senator here in Ohio.
Well, I'd be interesting to know, John. I had a quick look and can't find anything conclusive on it. But he went to Yale, so my first thought was Stephen Schwarzman went to Yale. We know he was a Skull and Bones member. I wonder if Vance was. I can't find anything to say he was or wasn't.
I've seen a change in J.D. Vance over the years. I can remember going to some Chamber of Commerce meetings. Probably 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years ago, before he ran for the Senate. He was just elected last, I guess, in 2022 to the Senate. But before that, I mean, he was on the speaker circuit because he'd written a book based on his life. It was actually a pretty good book called Hillbilly Elegy that was based on his family experience growing up in Middletown, Ohio. And I had done some legal work out in Middletown, and it was a economically devastated area. And, the family had a lot of trouble with opioid addiction and that sort of thing. And he wrote a book about it. And so when he first started, I think the feeling was he was kind of a liberal-leaning libertarian type. And so I've seen a bit of an evolution in his political mindset to be more conservative. Now, some people could say he's just faking it so he gets elected, but I don't know. I just am not getting that feeling and vibe from him. I've been in places in close quarter meetings. I don't know him, but so I think he's a good choice. But look, he went to Yale, and we're all concerned about people that went to Yale in many respects. I have friends who went to Yale, and they're left leaning. And if I put them on a political spectrum, I would put them sort of towards the lunatic end of the left. But they're still my friends, you understand. But they hold positions that I really find rather abhorrent. So I think JD's a good thing, but then, the association with Peter Thiel, and even, people are, everybody on what I would call the MAGA right seems to be very enamored with Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's dangerous too.
And he's got a lot of really bad ideas. For example, a big article in the New York Times yesterday about Elon wanting to populate Mars.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look at Elon, and it sort of looks like he's like, hey, I need to call, as soon as this meeting is over, I'm going to call my people at SpaceX and see if that rocket for Mars is ready to go.
Yeah. And of course he's advanced the trials more on those transhumanist goals with the brain implants too. I mean, Musk's dangerous.
As I think Joe Allen, who's on War Room a lot, JoeBot XYZ, where you can follow him in Substack. He said the other day, look, we need to remember that Elon Musk is the world's richest transhumanist. And the transhumanist agenda certainly does not comport with things in Scripture. And certainly when we read Revelation 13, we're like, this sounds like a transhumanist fantasy coming to light or coming to fruition.
It certainly does. And in many respects.
So, and so everything that happened with the Trump thing over the weekend, I agree with you. The 713, that kind of leapt out to me. And I don't really focus on that aspect of things that much, but it kind of leapt out at me like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And it appears, so there's a theory that Trump staged it. Trump staged it so he got the photo that he can use in his fundraising campaign.
And that comes from the blue anons or whatever on the left. That one.
Right.
Yeah.
And and then there are other people saying, we wish that had gone the other way, that he hadn't turned his head. And then on the right, though, I'm concerned too about a lot of people running out. Well, he turned his head, and that shows that he was protected by God because God is sovereign, and so this is man's God and God's man. And then the New Apostolic Reformation types that are part of the right who think we're going to build this great kingdom on earth, they're just going berserk now. This proves, as you mentioned earlier, that he's God's man.
Yeah.
God protected him. And I'm concerned about that because I think that one thing that I'm increasingly of the mind is that how this works out in the end is that the continuum is not the right way over here to the right and the left way over to the left, but it's more of a horseshoe where the left and right that are sort of controlling things meet in the middle. And so we have to be concerned about both of them, I guess is the best way to say that. And I don't know how to depict that graphically, but that's the best thing that I can come up with.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it, and that's the two heads of the same bird or whatever, the Hegelian dialectic and so on, and exactly right. You know, the thing is, John, people have grown up watching Westerns and so on, and there's always a good guy and a bad guy, and a bad guy gets taken out and the good guy has to win, and it's like, so people seem to naturally go that way. One of these people must be good and the other must be bad, so we've got to support the good guy. Now, if you're a leftist, you think Trump's the bad guy. Now, if you're a rightist, you think Biden's the bad guy. And so the other opposite is the good guy. Well, what happens if neither of them are? What happens if they're both puppets of the same system, ultimately controlled by Satan, who is trying to take us into the beast system and control both sides of it? And that's where I see it. And God can let them happen. God maybe did protect Donald Trump. But it doesn't mean just because he stopped Donald Trump from, being taken out that he means that I'm, sovereignly, Donald Trump's my man. Look at my golden orange-haired boy. It's not the way it is, and people have polarized on it.
Yeah, I do agree with it. And, and if you suggest something other than what people's conclusion is, you're immediately thrown into the fire, they want to consign you to hell because you disagree with them. And so it's very, very divisive. And I think those of us who look at Bible prophecy have to be kind of a little bit open to as to how these things are going to work out. Now, look, on the other hand, too, the way this thing went down, how does this guy climb up on the roof? And I've seen the interviews. I've seen video after video of people posting, and they're there. This is before the shooting took place, and they're there. There's a guy on the roof with a gun. There's a guy on the roof with a gun, and they're pointing out to the police, and nobody does anything.
Yeah.
And then he gets off the shots, and I'm trying to think. So it appears if you were looking at the stage, the shots came from the left. I'm not sure. I don't know. I was just looking at some graphics, and I'm not sure that I have the graphics correct as the direction that everything that where the shots came from. But I'm looking at a New York Post graphic right now, and it looks like the guy, if you're facing the stage, he's on the left. And so, but I heard somebody talking about it earlier today, analyzing it, and says they were acting like the shots came from the right as you looked at the stage. And how did it hit the guys sort of behind Trump? But looking at it was like the guys that got hit were between Trump and where the shooter was. So it's one of these things. It's sort of the fog of war. We don't know exactly how this is all going to play out.
No, we don't, and we may never know the truth. But I was thinking about it last night too. If you were, just say you didn't want someone to be taken out, but you were in the Secret Service or whatever, but you wanted, a scene to happen like that, perhaps you would try to choose somebody that couldn't hit the side of a barn, which appears to be what people are suggesting about that guy going through school being rejected as a shooter, and perhaps he got closer than they thought he would. I don't know.
Well, maybe he's been practicing in the 4 or 5 years since he got kicked out of the rifle club at high school. I mean, people are not. That's the other thing too, is we have this tendency to kind of freeze people in place. So like J.D. Vance went to Yale, so he must be all bad. Well, maybe he's changed.
Yeah.
It appears I've been watching him. Okay. And, and I went to one of the Fox News Senate debates, and I sat 6 feet from JD at that debate that was live on Fox a couple of years ago, and it was like, he's changed. He's really changed. And there were a lot of uber conservative people there at that debate. And I'm just telling you, they love JD Vance. Now, compared to Tim Ryan, who is kind of a leftist Democrat, that was a pretty easy thing. So he's changed over time. In fact, I think he's probably more conservative than Trump. And one of the things we're seeing right now, too, is Trump is sort of, I mean, we have to be honest about this. He's changing the Republican platform so that it's going to bring in, excuse me, it's going to bring in, it's softening the Republican position on abortion and LGBT issues. And so a lot of these Christian conservatives who are all pro-Trump are really kind of, they're torn about how everything is working out right now with Trump because he's backing off on this. And I noted this months ago that Trump was backing off on the abortion issue because he's a politician. Yes. And he's looking at it and he's seeing that this is not a winning issue for the Republicans in states. In fact, my county, I live in Delaware County, Ohio. It is a red county. It is conservative, but it's changing. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing counties in the country. A lot of building, a lot of houses being built, a lot of people moving in. And so it's changing politically and demographically. And last year we had a couple of issues on the ballot that were, one was pro-abortion. If you voted for this, it was pro-abortion. And that thing passed in my county by a 2-to-1 margin, almost a 2-to-1 margin. It was like 68 to 31%. That's a conservative red county. And so I think Trump looks at that, he's a politician. Yeah. And he says, okay, he sticks his finger up and says, well, we need to back off on this a little bit. And maybe I can do something after the election because I won't be able to stand for election again. This is my last shot. So the Republicans, they want to win. So they're changing it. But, I think if we conservative evangelicals, pro-life evangelicals, we look at what's going on and we have to say, I don't like that. But I'm just saying, I watch a show like The War Room. Steve Bannon's, Bannon's in prison right now, but Bannon's War Room and Mike, I'm trying to remember what his last name is. He runs the Article 3 project. He's great on the judicial decisions. And he's just saying, look, we want to win the election. We're going to have to make this change. Now, on the other hand, too, is one of the big cases against Trump was dismissed this morning. Yeah. We're recording this on Monday, July 15th, and that the judge down in Florida dismissed the documents case against Trump. Now, her decision was a little bit of she's a Trump appointee. She's not highly experienced, but she did have a lot of arguments on this case. And so there's a conflict in the courts right now as to whether a special counsel is can be constitutionally appointed or not. She came down on the side that he cannot. And I know there's at least 3 votes on the Supreme Court when the case gets there that's going to vote to support her. I can almost, Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch are all going to support the judge's dismissal of this case. So, but that case is gone until after the election anyway. So a lot of the lawfare things that they want to do against Trump are falling apart. Trump won on the immunity issue at the Supreme Court. So, but then on the other hand, the conservative position lost on the First Amendment, and Amy Coney Barrett voted with these crazy leftists on the Supreme Court, and so that it should concern us because the trouble you've had with some of your platforms taking your stuff down. These the media, the tech media companies, pushed by guys like Peter Thiel and everything, are censoring speech with the aid and assistance or direction of the government, which is constitutionally prohibited. But the way the decision came down is you don't have the ability to challenge that. I mean, you've effectively, they say, well, maybe wrong, but you don't have standing to bring the case. Well, if you don't have standing to bring the case, then the government can do whatever it wants. And it's very concerning. And so I think it's really going to lead to a lot of censorship and persecution. And that was I think a 6-3 decision with Roberts, Coney Barrett, and Kavanaugh voting with the crazy leftist part on the court.
Yeah. So again, it's like what I said earlier. It's just all of these things are coming down, basically restricting the freedoms of all of us. And this is where it's all going, so that then they can introduce all the digital things, the digital IDs and digital currencies and all of that, and the social credit scores eventually, and we won't have a voice. That they silence us, and they'll use, food, decimating the food production, which I'm constantly hearing about, things like that. Once people are hungry, they'll do what they're told.
Yeah, I mean, I played some clips in my update on Sunday, July 14th, from Tony Blair had a event last week in London called The Future of Britain. And he talked about, there was a lot of guys talking about digital ID. And there was a guy from India saying this is going to be great for humanity. This is going to make everybody efficient. It's going to make people, be able to work more, pay more taxes, but have more money in the end and be healthier because it's going to help us with healthcare. That was Tony Blair's part. And then Tony Blair also kind of threw out this, but, it may take some persuasion to get people to adopt this digital ID. So, I mean, that's clearly the plan. Yeah. There's big meetings at the UN in the fall, the Pact for the Future that they want to put in place. And I think all these things are very significant prophetically, too, as to the way it's going. And right now, I would say all of these things seem to be on a track where they're not going to be turned around.
And it doesn't matter whether you have Republicans or Democrats in the power, and it's not going to matter who is in power in Europe. And it hasn't mattered who's in power in New Zealand, like we changed the government, for a more conservative government, and yet the track is still basically the same. And, they have a point they want to get you to, and they'll take you the left way or the right way, but they'll take you there. And we're just speeding in that direction. And all these people that are saying, prophesying years of more prosperity for America and so on like that, it's like, and you just mentioned how the majority have become pro-abortion and things like that. So why is God going to bless a country anyway? I think what people really want is we don't want to lose our comfortable lifestyles. We want our nice house and our white picket fence, and that's what God does, isn't it? If we're Christians, and that's God, that's why we become Christians, for God to give us this fancy house and white picket fence. And that seems to be the way some people view it, rather than what if all that's swept away and taken out from under us? Are we still then going to trust God?
That's right. I mean, that was I also preached yesterday at Fellowship Bible Chapel, and the text was the last 13, 14 verses of Romans chapter 8. What shall separate us from the love of God? And you look at that, and none of that stuff supports a prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
But all of that stuff will not separate us from the love of God and the work that Christ has done. But we do have a tendency. I mean, I've been around church all my life. I've seen the growth of the prosperity gospel, health and wealth, and all of this stuff, and all these people say, we're going to take control of the kingdom. We're going to build. That's the church's goal or responsibility, is to build the kingdom of God rather than being faithful people. We're supposed to build the kingdom of God on earth. Well, the elites, what Patrick Wood describes as the technocrats and the transhumanists, they think they're going to do that too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes I'm wondering, like, and by the way, can you point to any place on the planet where anybody since Jesus left the Mount of Olives, about 2,000 years ago, has any place on the planet anybody ever built anything that would resemble what the kingdom of God is like as described in Scripture? No. And I don't think you can't point to a single place, even for a decade, where that happened anywhere on the planet. Yeah. And so maybe that's not what the church's mission has been all along. And so, but a lot of people focus on that because it gets us the stuff in life that we like. It makes us comfortable. And I just, I really think we're coming to a time where, there's going to be a division in the church over this stuff. And I think it's about time. Yes. Okay. So to close, John, what would you give as a takeaway message for our listeners? Well, I think one thing that I would do is just kind of buckle up, people, because it's going to be rocky. There's going to be a lot of things that don't happen that we like. But, and it does seem that a lot of people are against the Christian, the agenda, things that I think are important for, get the world getting ready for the return of the Lord. And they're going to be things that we don't necessarily like, but God is faithful and God will protect us. So we need to focus on that and share the gospel with people too, as much as possible. Absolutely. So, John, for those that don't know, where can people find you online? Yeah, fbchapel.com is the church website where I speak mostly. I think most of my social media, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Telegram, I think most of those are John Haller 54. You can follow me there, and then on Rumble, Fellowship Bible Chapel, and then if you just Google my name or do a search on YouTube or Rumble, you'll find a lot of teachings and stuff that I've done over the years. Awesome, thank you. And folks, also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, don't forget us, aminutetomidnight.com with Midnite spelled N-I-T-E. Please subscribe to us by going down the right-hand side of the web page and entering your email address where it says subscribe to blog, and subscribe to our various other feeds as well. And A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations too. So, John, thank you. I think that was an awesome discussion. I really enjoyed it. I think, hopefully we've brought a little bit of level-headedness to a crazy situation. At least that's my hope is. And we'll have to get together soon. It's been fascinating. Yeah, let's be sure to do it. I mean, I'm pretty sure there'll be plenty to talk about, and always enjoy the time that we can spend together. Oh, absolutely. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tony.